national, regional, and international issues in depth. Throughout more than 200 years, the relations between the Kingdom of Bahrain and the United Kingdom witnessed constant growth and infinite development in various sectors due to the bilateral keen interest to host pioneering projects and support leading initiatives. The cooperation in the field of education has gained special interest due to its importance of providing new generations of students with the best educational experience according to the highest international standards. One of the main fruitful results of such a collaboration is the establishment of the British Council, which has been performing its duties in the Bahraini community with continuous success since 1941. To talk more about that, we are pleased to be joined here in the studio by the Director of the British Council in Bahrain, Mr. Richard Roos. Welcome back. Joining me in the studio is Mr. Richard Roos. Thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure.
Mr. Roos, first off, it is known that the British Council's first office in Bahrain was established actually in 1941. And throughout the previous years, it has witnessed several stages of development. What can you tell us about the initiation, the history, and the phases that it went through until today?
It was started globally in the 1930s in very difficult times politically in the world, as you know, prior to World War II. And the idea of it was to help build connections between the people of the UK and the people of countries where the British Council operates. So, you know, the circumstances in which it was founded and where we are today, you might say are actually very similar. You know, there's a lot of tension in the world. There's a real need for people to understand each other, not to listen to, you know, fake news and sort of made up stories about each other, but to engage person to person and make that connection. So that has been, if you like, the common thread going right the way through. That's what we've always done. The way that we do it has been around education, arts, and the English language. Now, back in 1941, mostly what we did was to bring teachers. So the government of Bahrain would say, we really need somebody to teach girls maths in the Hidayah school. And we would help find a maths teacher who wanted to come and live in Bahrain for a few years and ship them out, put them on a boat, literally, and bring them here. So we started off largely recruiting teachers, then running libraries and having those public spaces for people to come and study, particularly because obviously at that time not everybody would have very good access to education and learning materials, so we could reach out a bit further that way. Then over the years we've done much more English teaching. That's a key skill which has obviously become much more important for people. In the 1950s, maybe you could live your whole life in Bahrain without speaking English, and that was fine. In 2021, you can't if you want a decent job. And
it even distinguishes Bahrain right now. It's one of the most prominent in English language within the GCC region.
It really is, and I think Bahrain's history with being first off the mark with education really shows that. I mean, it's partly the culture. Maybe it's a nation which looks outwards, that makes trading relationships with people. But yeah, I think it's always been in the lead in terms of educational attainment. And British Council obviously has supported that. The other areas that we work in, we do a lot with qualifications. So if you want to take a professional qualification from the UK here in Bahrain, you know, if you're going to become an accountant or you're doing a university postgraduate degree remotely, then you do that with us. We make sure everything's done properly according to the standards. And then we do what we can with artistic and cultural links, because obviously part of building this connection comes from education, but it comes from understanding each other, and that comes from telling stories through art, through writing, through music. And particularly when we think about the mutual aspect, you know, the historical relationship between the UK and Bahrain, you know, the UK was the colonial power, I suppose. You know, so the people in Bahrain in general know a lot about the UK. They're very familiar with it. Many people have travelled to the UK. A lot have studied there. I can't say the same about the UK the other way around. You know, a lot of people in the UK I don't think could find Bahrain on the map. So it's really important that we can take people who can represent some of Bahrain to the UK, because the Middle East in UK popular media is a pretty dark place. I mean, what you see in the news is Iraq, it's, you know, all the problems that happen in the region. And we need to show people that actually an average Bahraini family or person is very similar to an average British
Right,
person. The,
right.
the key things are the same for everybody. You
Yeah.
want to look after your family, you want to have a good career, you want to have a meaningful life, you know,
Right.
in a good community.
Yeah.
And the more we can show people that, the more we can make a real connection between
Right.
the two countries. So that's where we came from.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, another thing that's really important to mention is there are a lot of people from the UK that have made Bahrain a home for themselves, even for retirement years. They bought a home here while they were working, go back to the UK, and just move all of their stuff back to Bahrain. They want to retire here and live out most of their life, I mean, in retirement here. And that's something what Bahrain makes easy, that kind of ease of living, easy procedures, everything is attainable in Bahrain more than it is in the industrialized countries such as European countries all along, not just the UK. How do you value the cooperation between the UK? I mean, you mentioned a couple of things when it comes to education, but what's the value of that cooperation between UK and Bahrain in the educational field specifically?
I mean, fortunately now we're moving to a place where it can be really a kind of mutual benefit. I mean, I said before, when Britain was the colonial power, it was a bit more one way. I think it was the UK helping Bahrain to kind of move forward. What we can see now is it's a bit more on an equal footing. So, for example, you know, there are research collaborations between universities in the UK and universities here. And this is the kind of work the British Council helps to establish. So the University of Bahrain works with the University of Loughborough on climate science, because it's genuinely useful for UK researchers to test climate theories and equipment in a climate like Bahrain, totally different from the UK, and for scientists from Bahrain to be able to check that their stuff works, you know, in the UK.
Exactly.
So we're now getting to a point, I think, you know, where we can have that mutual relationship. But yes, I think, I mean, research is one area. Obviously, the kind of physical movement. I mean, you talked about the British people living in Bahrain and making it their home.
Yes.
And of course, there are many Bahrainis who study in the UK, and many kind of return backwards and forwards over time and make real lifelong friends there. So, I mean, that's the, if you like it, the essence of that knowledge and cooperation between countries is at the human level, right? It's that you have friends in the UK or in Bahrain, you understand them, you understand how they think, what's important to them. And then, you know, when it comes to the bigger, harder stuff, the politics and the economics and so on, you have a strong personal relationship to base it on, you know, and then we can enjoy a kind of long-lasting alliance like the UK has had with Bahrain in all of those other fields as well. So we try to support the human part, you know, the education part, the artistic part, the person-to-person part, because that helps the UK to have strong relationships with its friends and allies around the world. That's why we exist.
Absolutely. How do you value the support and the facilities provided by the Bahraini government towards education in terms of infrastructures and legislations? You've mentioned a couple of fields where education is basically the research part of it and so on, but we know that there are a lot of educational fields that Bahrain and the UK have a collaboration, whether it's military, whether it's medicine, different fields that we can actually see and visualize where students from both countries are actually participating in. So how do you value the support and the facilities that the Bahraini government provides for this?
I mean, I think it's, I mean, you know, you mentioned that for expatriates, Bahrain is seen as a place where it's comparatively clear and straightforward to set things up and do things. And I think the same is true for collaboration in the fields that we work in education and the arts. So, I mean, there are a number of British-based education organisations, schools, higher education colleges, who have long-standing partnerships with partners in Bahrain. You know, and that works really quite well. I mean, as an organisation, we work a lot, obviously, with the Ministry of Education, with the Higher Education Council, who are the people that set the frameworks for these kind of partnerships. And I think that works very well. You know, it's been a very challenging period over the last year and a half for everybody in education. Huge changes that everybody's had to deal with. You know, and I think Bahrain's done a pretty good job of making that very difficult transition. You know, it is difficult. In Bahrain, like in the UK, a lot of families have internet access, for example, but maybe they're just doing it on a phone or a tablet. Some families don't have laptops here and in the UK. Of course, when you try and do a whole school syllabus, through a mobile phone, it's really pretty difficult. So I think we've faced very similar challenges, and there have been opportunities to learn from each other. The handling of the coronavirus in general in Bahrain has been really good, and that's something that the UK has learnt from, in terms of the medical and the governance side. But I think both countries have shared best practice around how we manage the business of education. Yeah. And I think, the model which is going to happen going forward in Bahrain of this kind of more hybrid approach, I think we're seeing that also in the UK, particularly in higher education. I think that will be the new normal as we move forward.
Right. To bring it a little bit closer to the viewers, when it comes to the standards of education, the UK's long history in providing education has also given them the foot forward when it comes to putting down the standards, even though we're in the pandemic. And that's what is brought to Bahrain through the British Council, having those standards and making sure that they're still followed, even though we're in a pandemic and in the technological age of education. Have these standards changed because of the pandemic? Are they still the same? Do you work around them?
I think they're still the same, but it's a challenge to make the transition. I mean, the big area that a lot of people have been working on has been with the school exams, because obviously it's a critical moment, your school graduation, and how that allows you to get to university. So the exam boards in the UK, made did a lot of work in a very short space of time to enable the schools to give grades without large numbers of students going to an exam hall where obviously it's too risky. I think they've done it successfully. And my eldest daughter studies here, and she's just done her GCSEs.
Beautiful.
And she got good results, which I think are accurate. Actually, when I look at the subjects that she was best in, she got the best results. The ones that she was not quite so good in, she got not quite so good results. So I think people have made it work. I think what families really still value ultimately is face to face. I don't see that changing significantly anytime soon. Not in the UK and not in this part of the world. This is a society where people enjoy kind of real personal connection. I know, just thinking locally about what we do in Bahrain, we're about to start our first term back fully face to face with the English lessons, and we have a lot of families saying, I can't believe finally now we can come back, we can get back into the classroom with the teacher, that although people have done their best to maintain, the problem is, I think, not really the standards with online education, it's just the human part, particularly for younger children. If you're 6 or 8, spending 90 minutes staring at a computer, it's difficult to concentrate.
And you don't want your child to be the new normal.
Exactly. As parents, you think, well, we don't want them to spend all day long staring at the screen. It's what it is, and it's what's been necessary in the pandemic. But I think the engagement for children in a room with other children, able to interact properly, you can't ever replace that with a computer, and I don't think we should be trying to do that.
Absolutely.
But certainly as you get older, I think with higher education in particular, I think we will see a blended or a hybrid model everywhere going forward. The other thing, just to mention on standards, the one thing that I'm really impressed with, both from our side and in Bahrain, is the really important things like protecting children, dealing with special needs. There's been a real effort to make sure that parents get some of the support that they need if they have a child with special needs.
To integrate them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's critical, because we know that when things disrupt normal education, the children who can lose out most are the ones who have more complex needs. But I think the ministry and us ourselves with our English classes have made a real effort to make sure that those children are properly included, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, it is. Can you tell us more about the courses that the British Council offers and the programs that they offer?
Yeah, we stick fairly closely to our kind of core competency, which is in English. I think the important thing about it's not so much the fact that we teach English, but I think it's how we teach English. So for a long time, our philosophy has been that it's very much about the kind of full development of the child, and that it should be a student-centered approach. A lot of children get put off learning English if they learn it in a very old-fashioned kind of strict way, just
Yeah.
memorizing lots of grammar and so on.
Exactly.
And our focus is really on communication and also independent learning. You know, the goal is that the child should have a bit more motivation and sense of control over their own learning to
Yeah.
say, you know, I want to be better at this. How do I do that? The teacher can help me to be better at this. And in the end, we can look back and say, you know, are we better or not? And that's the best way to learn it, rather than I'm sitting here because, you know, my parents told me to get better at English, which is
Right.
not a good motivation. I
Mhm.
mean, certainly not like if you're a teenager. No
Right.
teenager wants to go and do things just because their parents told them
Exactly.
to. So I think for us that's the important thing. So we obviously we have rules and so on in the classroom, but we try very hard to put the students at the centre and let them direct what's happening as far as possible.
Yeah.
And that fits, I think, with the way the UK curriculum has evolved, you know, in schools in the UK. It used to be, when I went to school, it was pretty old-fashioned. It was the teacher tells you what to do, you write it down, you get whacked on the hand with a
I
ruler if you're
understand.
not concentrating, that
Yeah.
kind of model.
No.
Whereas now it's very much, you know, how do we help this child develop their full potential?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, Bahrain, particularly with its emphasis, early emphasis on education for girls, and the way that that has produced a much more diverse workforce with women in more senior positions,
Right.
is a really good example of that kind of potential argument, that if you say each child has the potential to do something great in this country, if we can unlock it, if we can give them the tools, and that applies to girls as well as boys, because in the past, obviously, the priority in many countries has been towards boys, not girls.
Yeah.
And you can see that now. So if you look across ministries, companies, you know, large organizations, parliament in Bahrain, it's full of, you know, strong, independent women who are, you know, getting their views across, making sure that the direction of the country incorporates them as well. And I think British Council takes a very similar philosophy, wherever you come from as a child, even if your home background is maybe a bit tough, you know, maybe difficult, maybe your parents are not super educated, but
Yeah.
they've decided that they want to help you with the English, it should be opening a door for you for the rest of your potential. Then once you've got the English, you can get out into the world, you can go and be the sort of full person that you had the potential to be.
Absolutely. I've actually been through the British Council program, but in Saudi Arabia,
Okay.
because that's where I'm from. And it's true. I mean, even the old kind of curriculum was based on conversation and real-time events. So when you're actually put in that event, your brain immediately goes to the English side, where you start actually having that conversation in English, and it strengthens you and gives you that kind of sense of accomplishment, and just the fact that you know that you can speak a second language, or like in my case, like being trilingual and having to do that at home, it makes the conversation easier. And learning English through conversation has always been my go-to when teaching anybody English, even me as a second language.
Well, I mean, at the end, that's the thing which is motivating and useful for most people, right?
Right.
You know, and it's also the area where you benefit from having a really good teacher.
Yeah.
You know, you can learn grammar at home. You can sit at home. You can watch YouTube videos of people explaining the present perfect.
Right.
You know, you can practice in exercise books. But what you can't do is get feedback on the language that you're producing.
Right.
You know, the words that you say or the words that you write. So yeah, if you have that kind of teacher who says, right, let's arrange this class so that people are really communicating in a meaningful way with stuff which is relevant to them, then as you say, you come out of it thinking, I can do this.
Yeah.
I don't have to be the shy kid,
Yeah.
you know, who can't get their ideas out. I can actually say what matters to me. No, I mean, that's, I think, the core philosophy around that kind of communicative style.
Yeah, and I do notice, like, even in schools here, students that speak English, you'd ask them, okay, why did you pronounce, or do you say the sentence this way? And most of the time they're like, because it's said that way. They don't know the exact grammar. They're like, because it sounds right. So that's what how conversation helps. In performing its duties, the British Council has cooperated with various local institutions. What can you tell us about the importance of and the outcomes of these cooperations, and how does it contribute positively to achieving the aspired goals that you've set for yourself?
I mean, it's absolutely essential, because we're comparatively, you know, quite a small organization. You know, and if we want to reach as many young people as possible, you know, it's easier in a country like Bahrain than Saudi Arabia, obviously,
Right.
where the geography and the size is huge. But no, we absolutely have to work with partners. So, I mean, the Ministry of Education is the biggest one, because if we want to work with government schools, which is the majority of children in Bahrain, then they're the partner that we have to talk to. So, for example, for I think 5 years in total, we just finished recently, we ran a program called Takaddam, sponsored by HSBC Bank, with teams of students from every government school in Bahrain.
Okay.
And that's a program about personal skills, self-development, and with a kind of community-focused big task at the end. So there's a thing a little bit like one of those kind of Dragon's Den type competitions where each team comes forward and says, our vision is this is our idea. And this is all for secondary school students.
Nice.
So with a program like that over 5 years, we've worked with several thousand children, several hundred teachers across these different schools. And we've given each of those children just a little help with how do I manage my own motivation? What kind of person do I really want to be? What's my contribution going to be? But to do that, we obviously need to work very closely with the Ministry of Education to go to schools, to talk to children from schools and do that. And they've been really supportive. That's been a really fantastic program. I think we work with almost everybody in education or the arts in Bahrain, Higher Education Council, but the individual universities and colleges as well. Right. We've done a lot with the University of Bahrain. I think, I might say we work a little bit more with the government side, just because there we can reach more people in one go, if you like. Yeah. And also perhaps the need is a bit greater in some cases. So some of the private universities or private schools are, very wealthy, very well-resourced.
Yes.
The best private schools don't need help from the British Council, to improve some
They probably
aspects of
studied
it.
there.
Well, exactly. We want our efforts to go where they have the most impact. And that's a very wide range. But no, I think I've really enjoyed this aspect of working in this role myself, actually, just as a person. Right. That I think I've met almost everybody who does something important in education.
There you go.
What amazes me is like your story about starting off with the British Council.
Yeah.
I meet so many people who say, when I was 8, I went to the British Embassy building in Manama and started learning English with the British Council. And then after that, I did a PhD and all of these things. Yeah. And now I'm the president of this university and doing these things. So it's a really lifelong engagement. And I think, this is one of the reasons why I love working in this job, because I love meeting people who tell me things like that. It shows that we're doing something that's really valuable to people. Yeah. And like I said before, it helps to open that potential for each person and to start a connection with the UK that we hope will then lead to further studies, business deals, friendships, all of those things that come with having that relationship. And that's a really good line of work to be in. It's a lot easier to go to work in the morning if you're doing something where that's the kind of end result that you feel, okay, I really achieved something useful today for all of these children who benefited from this.
And it's really important to understand that this is an ongoing kind of educational system. I remember students that graduated from the British Council in Saudi Arabia teaching elderly how to speak English. So you'd have these mothers that have grown children, but they never spoke a word of English. They had free time on their lives. They would take classes for adults or elderly even for English, just to know the basics, to know how to communicate within the community. So that's something that's always ongoing. The British Council is working together with local partners, we've mentioned some of them, to address major issues in the area of employability. What can you tell us about the importance of the outcomes of such initiatives?
I'm sure very well, better than me, the aims of the 2030 vision that's been laid out by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince for the future of Bahrain. And I think ultimately for every country in sort of 2020, 2021, we're looking at the same sorts of issues. So English is obviously important, maths is very important, computer skills, these are the kind of core technical things. Right. That if you want to work, because every job now is pretty much got an international component. Right. Maybe you can find a small company somewhere where you don't deal with anybody outside your country, but for most people, you have to be able to deal with those things. So that's true for young people in Britain just as much as it is for young people in Bahrain. So there are those core technical skills. But I think more than that, the thing that we're really working hard on is around flexibility and sort of adaptability and the ability to learn throughout your life. Because the one defining feature that we see everywhere is that the pace of change is getting faster and faster. You know, when I talk to young people who are studying with us now in the British Council, you know, they want to be YouTubers, you know, or influencers or things like that. You know, and those jobs didn't exist 20 years ago. And probably in 20 years' time, something different will be in their place. So when we're teaching teenagers now, yes, we can give them the skills that will help them to be good influencers or YouTubers and go down that path. But even more than that is we want to equip them with the ability to be flexible and keep learning, with the kind of curiosity, the flexibility in their mind, so that in 20 years' time, when YouTubers are like, oh, so 2020, nobody does that anymore, they can do the new thing. Because this is always a challenge for every country, for education ministries, you know, because you have a big government ministry, you have a lot of teachers who are, you know, like me in their 40s, 50s, who are not, you know, contemporary with the young people that they're teaching, and you have a syllabus, you know, which comes from previous generations of syllabuses. So there's always a kind of time lag between what students are interested in and what they need for the future, and, you know, what a ministry or a school is delivering. You know, so I think this is the core area. So when it comes to employability, as I say, the technical skills, yes, you know, and the English part, obviously, this is what we do. Other people can, you know, teach them very well to do maths and computer skills. But then, like I mentioned with the Takadam project, making sure that young people understand, okay, this is my motivation, these are the things that are important, and building that sort of determination and sense of self-management, I think, is a critical step in development from being a sort of teenager to being an adult. Not specifically in Bahrain, in every country, worldwide. But the skills that we can give that help people to navigate that transition, so that by the time they finish university, they have a vision, they have clarity in their mind. Okay, I want to be this kind of person who does these things. These are the skills that I have. This is what I need to learn more. That's what makes people employable. You know, what employers, I think, don't want is somebody who turns up and says, well, you know, I can sort of do this, but I'm not really bothered. You know, that's where it fails. Whereas somebody who says, you know, I'm really keen to learn, I'm excited about this, I can do this thing, and I'm working on this one. That's somebody you can work with, right? You can say, okay, let's train you, let's build you up. You know, and the resources are here. You know, Bahrain is very lucky that there are bodies like Tamkeen, there are things which will help a young person to build those skills if they have the willingness and the ambition to do it. You know, so I think that's where we try to help, to make sure that there's a real focus.
When it comes to the English language, a lot of people might think, okay, English is easy. You can go on an application like Memrise or Babbel and just learn the language there. But what you're talking about is something more specific, especially Bahrain is growing more in the vocational education field. And all of the English used there is extremely technical when it comes to the technical issues. If it's something that has to do with mechanical engineering in the vocational schools, or for instance, CNS, which is a nurse assistant, they have the medical terminology in the English language, and these overlap, and that's where learning English is different. If you want to go more technical, then you have to ask for a certain kind of curriculum that's more specified to your education. Do you sort of fit that into programs if it's needed?
We don't do it specifically for a sector. So we run general employability skills programs, which take in those soft skills plus the English part. I mean, I would go back to what I was saying before in terms of what happens in the classroom versus what happens at home. on the technical English side, I would say in many ways it's actually easier because it's mostly just vocabulary, right? If you're a nurse, you've got a million different body parts that you have to learn what to call them. Yeah, lots of Latin, not just English. And if you're a mechanic, then it's hundreds of complicated sounding, mechanical things.
Even mathematical equations and stuff like
exactly.
that.
But all of this is really just vocab, and you can match it up. Okay, the Arabic word for elbow is this, and the English word is elbow, and the Latin is whatever. You can tell me. But the important part is that you give people, again, that communicative practice. So if you take nursing as an example, if you know the 5 different technical words that you know, can you put them into a sentence which communicates what you want to communicate, with the right style for the physician and with the right style for the patient?
Right.
To be a great nurse, you have to look both ways, right? So I think communicative, technically it's called communicative competence. This is one of the things that language teachers talk about.
Yes.
And that's really what we want people to get. And the flexibility and the sort of self-awareness to be able to say, okay, today I got better at this.
Yeah.
I still have a long way to go with this thing. I'm not very good at that yet.
Yeah.
I need to work on that because that's important to me. So I think that's the place we would try to be.
Right.
So in terms of general English, in terms of English for work and employment,
Yeah.
and also in terms of passing exams,
Yeah.
because there are lots of different opinions about whether exams are the best way to test people's knowledge about things, but they exist and they're a very important part of the world. So we also do quite a lot of things like preparing people for IELTS exams.
Yes.
People who need to take their IELTS to go and study in the UK or to emigrate or to do lots of different things. And people need help to be ready for the tough exam, to get the grade you want, depending where you are when you start. So we do quite a lot of that, helping people to get ready for particular exams that are important for them. Because, in the real world, having the skill is one thing, that's very important, but proving that you have the skill is equally important.
Absolutely. The British Council, you've mentioned it a couple of times, gives a priority to arts and artists due to the belief that arts can create new ways of learning. Can you tell us about the Council's efforts in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, very people to people, because in the end what we're doing is we're trying to tell stories so that people, or help people who have good stories to tell them, so that people in the UK can understand more about the reality of life in Bahrain, and the other way round, people in Bahrain to understand about the UK. I mean, a nice example that we had just pre-COVID-19, so it's unfortunately not here anymore, was an exhibition of photographs that we held across the Gulf called The Place I Call Home.
Okay.
And this was photographers from across the Gulf and from the UK, just taking almost like family portraits, so the house or some part of the house, maybe with some members of the family and maybe not, just showing what their life is like. But the sort of twist in the story, if you like, was that it was people living in the opposite place. So it was Gulf nationals who were living in the UK or studying in the UK, taking a picture of their life in the UK.
Right.
So, and it's really kind of eye-opening because it's very unexpected in a way. You see people, for example, in a kind of small, typical British sort of terraced house, somebody who's studying in a university there. And then sort of you see the next shot and it's inside, and it's set up for iftar because it was in the middle of Ramadan. So something like that, or you have the sort of some of the British expatriates living this kind of half British, half Gulfy kind of life out here somewhere like Bahrain, and then all put together in an exhibition. It shows really interesting sort of insights into just how much is similar. The family values, the importance of the relationships closest to you, what it feels like to live far away from home. I'm sure you've lived abroad. I live abroad most of my time, and that has great excitement and interest, but also great challenges. And that's true for everybody that lives as an expatriate for some time. So things like that. And that exhibition toured the Gulf states and 5 different cities in the UK, so that people can go and get that sense of understanding. So we try and do things like that, where we have kind of really great stuff to share that we can bring. then we do that too. So still in the National Museum, there's an exhibition about underwater dinosaurs called Dive into the Jurassic, which comes from the UK's Natural History Museum. Now, that was supposed to be here for 6 months and then go back, but it got stuck because of COVID-19, so it's still here.
It's ongoing.
Which is great, yeah. And that's where we're really lucky that we have a fantastic museum in the Natural History Museum in London, which is able to produce these kind of exhibitions. And our Department of Culture, Media and Sport basically sponsored this exhibition to tour around Gulf countries. So when we share these things, and when school children come and discuss them with their teachers and with the people in the museum, we're building that kind of shared understanding about our world, about our heritage and our culture. So that's the kind of thing that we try and do. I wish we could do more. The problem with funding big things in arts is just that it costs loads and loads of money. And if you want to bring like an orchestra or a theatre company,
even that is possible, sort of. I mean, Bahrain has their police orchestra that is very well known, and a lot of them did study in the UK. So you can see how the culture really did affect the art and the cultural scene in Bahrain and vice versa.
And the things like the Spring of Culture Festival, I mean, that's always got a strong UK element, and the Bahrain Authority for Culture and Antiquities, I think, works very closely with us and with partners, organisations in the UK. No, I mean, and that's what in the end binds people together, right? It's that shared understanding, the shared values, and as I said at the beginning, talking about the history of the British Council, surely in the world that we're in today, we need even more of that rather than less. So I hope we'll be able to continue doing lots of that kind of work, because it's vital.
It is. After many years of providing educational services in Bahrain, what can you tell us about the British Council's main achievements in terms of facts and figures?
I mean, because it goes back a long time, depending how you want to calculate it, the figures are very huge. But I think we can honestly say that we've taught several 100,000 people English, and we've delivered around 100,000 examinations to people, of all kinds. So whether they're accountants or health and safety officers or all kinds of things. I mean, in a typical year, maybe it's more approachable to think about the sort of scale that we work at now, but we would aim to teach, I think, directly about 5,000 people in a year. That would be the sort of scale. We'd probably deliver about 10 or 12,000 exams. And through our partnerships with the Ministry of Education and the work that we do in schools, we try to have some impact on every child in Bahrain. That's the goal. That everybody, we can't work with everybody directly, but if we don't work with you as a child, hopefully we have provided some support or some useful materials to your teacher, or we've helped your school to get better at doing this thing. So for example, we run a professional network for English teachers in Bahrain, which has several thousand members, which is basically everybody in Bahrain who teaches English. And we have a big annual conference, and we bring speakers from the UK. So the chances are, if you're learning English in an institution in Bahrain, your teacher has attended that, and hopefully we've been able to give them some useful professional support, whether that's better materials or new ideas for, again, trying to bring people with us to this more communicative model of teaching. It's hard. I mean, I wouldn't want to suggest it's, if you're in a crowded school, maybe your classroom's not the best, maybe you've got 40 children, maybe some of the children are more motivated than others, so it's tough. I wouldn't for a moment, kind of downplay the difficulties that teachers face. But with every lesson that you teach, there is a way to make it a little bit more exciting or relevant or communicative, even in difficult circumstances. And every time we can help a teacher move a little bit that way, that's a little bit more empowering, for that student. And then, in the end, we will end up, with more of those young people coming out of the education system, able to work, ready to work, and I hope positive about the UK and what the UK can do for them in the future. That's what we want. That's why we do what we do.
And knowing a second or even a third language is eye-opening in terms of the future of these children. I mean, having that look into a different culture is opening horizons in the educational field for them. I mean, instead of being limited to one specific area. The current health circumstances, we've tapped on the subject a little bit, but they contributed further to implementation of technology in the educational field. Bahrain was pretty much ready for a digital education system. They didn't want to implement it just yet, but they had to. Can you tell us how the British Council's efforts are in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're, not particularly different from everybody else. We're trying to make the technology work as well as we can. Mostly it's worked extremely well. Mostly we've been very happy with the level of engagement of the people that we teach. Sometimes it's been challenging, as I said before, the younger the child, the more difficult it is, I think, to have all of your education online. It's less motivating and engaging. But yeah, I think, the key things are to maintain the quality of the interaction with the teacher. So to make sure that even if it's remotely, you've set it up in a way so that the child can contribute, they can produce work. The danger, I think, with the online methods of teaching is that it can be a bit passive for the student. If it becomes a broadcast, just the teacher talking for 45 minutes and the students listening, I've done teaching online and you don't know what's happening at the other end.
It becomes mundane.
Yeah, and you don't know if the student's awake or asleep or taking notes or not taking notes, so it's very important for teachers to make sure that the way that they plan the lesson involves lots of opportunities for the students to participate, whether they're typing something or saying something.
Right.
And also so that you can then give them the feedback, because as I mentioned, the thing which is most valuable, I think, when you're learning is that you try a difficult new thing. Somebody who knows it very well and is kind and supportive says, okay, you did this part well, but this part you need to do it more like this, or why don't you try doing it in this way?
Right.
And then you say, okay, I'll try that again, and then you do that again, and you're a little bit better. And the teacher says, okay, you're really good, you're getting better at that. Now let's try making it a bit more difficult by doing this thing. So I think trying to keep that kind of dynamic, that kind of interaction is the challenge. So I've seen a lot of teachers using all the features that you get with these platforms, the breakout rooms, the shared documents and things that people are working on. I think it works well using projects. So where I've seen very successful teaching, a lot of teachers have managed to get their students to work together on a collaborative project, which is also very good for developing the sort of team working, collaboration skills that we know that people need to have. So I think overall we've all done pretty well actually in Bahrain and for us in British Council. It'll be interesting to see what happens now, because we're right at the beginning of the next school year. I think what we start off doing now is likely to be more or less the model that we run for this academic year, that's starting right now in September. So that's going to be really important, because we've had a very up and down 18 months. I know as a parent, I'm really hoping that my children settle into a steady routine in September, that they can go back to school face to face. I think that's what they want to do, and that we can just get back to something that feels a bit more like normal. But the digital part will be with us for the long term. And there is a lot of evidence and research anyway that says for those old-fashioned bits, the grammar, the lists of vocabulary, that's much easier to learn by yourself at your own speed online, as long as it's managed and looked after by the teacher. If you want to spend half an hour just reading vocabulary, why not do that when it suits you, on your phone, in the car, on the bus, whatever it is.
Audiobooks are available now.
Exactly. And then your time with the teacher, whether it's in the British Council or even in an ordinary government school, that's where you get the real value of the teacher guiding you, pushing you a little bit, helping
you that feedback that you need.
Exactly, so that you can learn and get to the next step.
Absolutely.
And I think that will be the future. I think the days when the teacher stands at the front and says, right, now I'm going to talk for half an hour
Lesson 1.
and tell you, lesson 1, here we are, page 1, and we start explaining all of these things. I think that's probably gone or going. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is.
I think the other, sorry, just one more point on that one,
please
because
do.
I'm a teacher myself, and this is a change which has happened, in my lifetime. I got my first English teaching job in 1993.
Okay.
I went to Slovakia in Central Europe, and I walked into a classroom full of teenagers with an English book and a blackboard, and some chalk, and they didn't know any English at all, and I had the book, and then we started, I started teaching them, and I was transferring the English, from me to them slowly through chalk and so on in this classroom. If you fast forward to now, children who arrive at the British Council and maybe start studying at the age of 5 or 6, they already know lots of English. They've been watching, Peppa Pig on YouTube.
Yes.
So they all
Netflix.
In all of their life, English is everywhere. So our job is not to be the people who know English.
Yeah.
Our job is to guide them to becoming better at English, to give them that feedback and to help to steer them, to make it easier for them by doing it in an organised way. But nobody in education is the sacred keeper of the knowledge anymore. It doesn't work that way. The knowledge is out there. What people need is guides and supports, to help them to make their way through it and to grow as people in the process. So that's kind of where I think we all need to go.
Right. The British Council is a very esteemed institution that's been here since the 1940s, and we talked about that. But I'm sure you guys have future plans and some upcoming projects that you guys are preparing. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, we've got quite a lot. Some things continuing from what we've done before, and some new things. The core doesn't change, so we're still going to carry on working in English. So English, particularly for children, that's our largest group of customers. And English for employability, to help people to get into the workforce. That's a critical part of contributing to what Bahrain is doing. With exams, we're, again, still have school exams, and as we talked about, that's been a really complex last couple of years, but that's growing, and the need to have good quality standards in education is even stronger than it was before. In terms of our engagement with people, one of the things that we're building up at the moment, which we've done a little bit in the past, but not as much as I would have liked, is our work with alumni. Okay. So alumni of British universities, because there are a large number of people in Bahrain who have studied in the UK at some point in their career. And what we want to do is to develop that as a network of people. We already have several thousand people in a network doing that, and to kind of keep that link with the UK going. So at the moment what we're doing is we provide regular kind of talks and conferences on particular sectors that are interesting to people, so things like healthcare or environment, and we in some cases can provide training, so to help people to get to the next step in their career if they're missing one of those kind of soft skills that we were talking about. So I'm excited about that because we've done very well at working with young people, I think. We haven't done as well as we should in the past about keeping that connection going throughout life. For people who worked in education, yes. So with researchers, with people in universities and schools. But out in the general population, if you become an accountant, with a great degree from the UK and you look back very, positively on your time, we want to stay in touch with you. We want you to be part of the network, and then we want you to be able to share your experience and your wisdom with somebody who's just coming back next week after completing their degree and starting off their career in Bahrain, so that connection with the UK stays relevant and valuable to people. So that's very important to us. We're doing more collaborations with the Higher Education Council on research, in particular helping younger people to develop that kind of mindset for research. So it's not just something that you wait until postgraduate to do, but you do it at undergraduate level, even in secondary school, because that's a very effective way of thinking.
It's a life skill that you need.
Exactly, and not just if you're going to be a researcher, right? But in many walks of life, the ability to collect evidence, to analyze it, to make a hypothesis, to test it, to prove things.
Especially in the era of social media and news.
Well, exactly, because that critical thinking, you know, going back to what we were saying about the skills that people need. If we've learned anything in the last couple of years, it's that, you know, people really need the ability to look at a mass of information critically, to think what of this is verified and believable. And what do I need to be very careful with, you know, that we don't end up with some of the crazy scenes that we see in other parts of the world. So I think that's really, really important. And the last thing I would mention, I mentioned the Takadam project, which we did for 5 years with schools. Our focus for the next year is going to be continuing work that we've done with schools around sports and leadership. So teaching children leadership skills through sports. And in particular focusing on children with disability this year. So that's going to be our focus in this year, to really broaden that out. We had some great success with it last year. You know, what we want is for those young people to be able to kind of build themselves up through sport and bring others with them. Not just the kids who are already great at sports, but get those kids to be inspiring and bring the kids, you know, who never thought it was for them, and show them that it can be, that they can be a bit more. It goes back to the potential, like I said before. Amazing. Identify the things that will take them forward.
Really looking forward to that. Thank you so much for answering our questions today and being with us here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
And we'd like to thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, and we'll see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.